This is Kent Mulget with KelownaNow, joined by Miles Prodan, President and CEO of the BC Wine Institute. Good to have you.
Happy to be here.
So, lots happening. You've probably had more responsibility in the last few weeks than have ever suddenly fallen upon you with this attack on BC wineries from the province of Alberta.
Well, the BC wine industry is a busy sector for sure. But this latest ban of wine into Alberta has been very problematic for us. So yeah, it's been a busy 2 weeks trying to manage our way through this for sure.
So a few of the actions we'll get to in a minute, but I first should, in the way of full disclosure, mention to our viewers that my family in particular is directly affected by this. So first of all, tell me your reaction when you heard about this personally.
What was complete surprise? You may or may not know, but we've been looking at trade actions from around the world. The BC wine industry has been specifically targeted, I'll call it, through NAFTA negotiations. When we're talking about renegotiating NAFTA, BC wine, not just the Canadian wine industry, but the BC wine industry specifically has been called out. We've got a number of trade actions from WTO. So Australia's filed a World Trade Organization consultation, they call it, which is a precept to a challenge, calling out, again, BC wine, and not just within the Canadian wine industry. And similarly from California, so another WTO challenge. So we'd had all these trade issues that were sort of on the... And then out of the blue came this action from Alberta. So we were not expecting that whatsoever. Trade, we're used to talking about that, but being embargoed from Alberta, what amounted to instantaneously, we're not expecting that at all.
Right. So, what were you? Did it make you angry? Were you?
Well, no. I mean, I think in part we sort of understood that there is some policy issues between discussions and debates between Alberta and British Columbia. I mean, that doesn't go unnoticed with respect to a sector that has absolutely nothing to do with the wine industry. So we knew that there were discussions going on, but we were not expecting BC wine industry to be dragged into that.
You were surprised.
Totally surprised, yeah.
And what was the reaction from your member wineries? What were they?
Concern. I mean, Alberta is the second biggest market outside of BC for BC wine. So it really amounts to about 20% of all bottled and produced wine from British Columbia is sold through Alberta. So to have that door literally slammed shut overnight is of an issue. There's a bunch of inventory that would have been in the market, but that got sold through very quickly upon the announcement. I think it was indicative of Albertan support for BC wine, the concern that they weren't going to be able to get any more, so they rushed out and bought what they could. But that dried up all the inventory at the warehouse with the government monopoly in Alberta, and so that's left the shelves starting to empty out. And if you're a wine retailer or a restaurant, you can't leave empty shelf space. So if you can't replace that with BC wine, you're going to go out and find something else. And
right.
You're going to put that on the shelf or put that on the wine list. So trying to fight our way back onto those lists and to those shelves is part of the long-term effect that this is going to have.
Right. So the news of the day is that the latest in your efforts to try to redress this has been made. You've filed you're going to file an injunction.
Yep. Early this week, late last week, the BC government announced that they were going to. They asked for consultations with Alberta under the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. And so there's a consultation process that they have up to 180 days to talk it out. And if that doesn't go anywhere, they strike a panel, and the panel investigates, and that can take anywhere between 18 to 24 months. Again, it's a bit of an issue because when Premier Notley announced this ban on BC wine, she was asked about what effect that was going to have, or what would happen under the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, and the possible fine that could be levied, and she figuratively shrugged and said, it didn't matter to her.
So it won't happen timely, and the fine won't be that great.
Yeah,
so they can shrug that off. But this injunction, could it actually stop the ban?
Well, I mean, that's what we're doing this for. I mean, the only reason we are stepping up and taking litigation is to make sure we have an immediate effect. We can't wait that long. Many of our wineries here in this province are small, family-owned. Really struggling to make a living. It's not a business that you necessarily get rich quick at. It's farming is really what it is. And so to have your market, to shut out of an important market like that is critically important. So we thought we have to do something on behalf of the industry. We have to step up. And we think there's a bigger issue here. We think it's fundamentally constitutional, prohibitive for a country, or sorry, in this instance, a province, to deny access to its market just solely based where you come from. It has nothing to do with the product itself. It has nothing to do with how our product is made. It has to do with the fact that it comes from BC. So that makes no sense at all. And we think all Canadians should be worried about what precedents this sets. So we had to act, and we are, and we're going to file an injunction, an immediate injunction, to get access, and then a chance to sit down and put it before a judge and see what he thinks.
Right, and in the meantime, there's this ongoing difficulty in gaining legal access to ship directly to wine customers in certain provinces, including Alberta.
Exactly. I mean, again, that speaks to this whole issue about interprovincial trade, and we've been having this fight for some time. We were backers in the Como cases before the Supreme Court, which was really arguing the point that any province, doesn't have the right to stop the free access of a Canadian product to a fellow Canadian. So it's just a monopoly within these provinces. That's the anomaly that controls that access. And we've said all the way through that this is a dangerous way to do business, because what if in the circumstance, who could ever imagine it happening, where a province could shut completely access from another province, which is exactly what's happened to Alberta.
Right.
So it's the worst case scenario that we feared, and it's come to fruition, unfortunately. So we regretfully take the action. We're not really built for legal action. We're a marketing organization. We like to talk about and enjoy and sell and market BC wine, but we can't stand by and have this happen. We need to act on behalf of the BC wine industry, and we are.
And now, with all of this attention on the wine industry, and BC wine in particular, is there a way to sort of turn that into at least a small positive?
Well, two points to that. I think one is this province has been really good. BC people from BC consumers have long been big supporters of BC wine, so we're very fortunate in that. And so we think that there's demand. So it's just a matter of access. So we've approached the current government and asked for some help in making sure there's better access, maybe allowing or making it easier for smaller wineries to get into BC liquor stores. This government's announced April being BC Wine Month. So there's sort of some short-term things we can do there. And we're excited about that, because I think that, as I say, the demand's there, and now we've got excess supply that's no longer in Alberta. But more importantly is also this the legal aspect of it, and really shining a light on the fact that we are prohibited as farmers of 100% BC product of selling that to someone else in another province. So I think maybe we can get some traction there. And we've been saying this for some time, and I don't think people really understood what it meant. But this really drives it home what that lack of access means, and we can be held, what I call, hostage to governments that has no interest. Our sector has no input into what they're talking about.
I have a suspicion that there's some wine that gets sold directly to consumers who live in provinces that say don't allow it.
Yeah.
I imagine that probably would increase in a situation like this.
Well, you would think, but Alberta, in Alberta's instance, they've claimed to be clamping down on that. I'm not sure how they could, because again, there are I believe BC wineries that are shipping wine to Albertans. Of course there are. We know there's wine club members that are doing that, and so. But we've heard of Alberta wine club members dropping off of the wine clubs here in BC, if only because of fear of somehow being offside. And Alberta's made it clear that doing that is not on. The regulations in Alberta don't require that. Right. So,
do you have any sense if Albertans support what their government is doing vis-a-vis the BC wineries?
I think it's a good question, and I think the difficulty we have is really we're now tied, somehow BC wine's been tied into emotions around a very politically charged sector. When you start talking about natural resources and the environment and all those things, there's different opinions, and somehow we've been linked. We're not somehow, but we have been linked to how you feel about those issues somehow relates to what you choose to put in your glass. And so I think that's unfair. I think the fact that Albertans have really embraced the BC wine that's available or was available is a good sign. And the worry is what's next. It's wine, and so what other industries can be impacted. And our concern is tourism in the summertime, right? And that's just not the wine industry. That's Albertans maybe now choosing not to come to BC for.
Do you think there is some of that? Like, are they so on side with this that BC's against us?
It's tough to tell. We don't want to put that to the test, but I mean now it's emotionally charged, and somehow as I say, your preference for drinking wine somehow relates to your stand on other issues, which doesn't make sense to us.
I don't know what the way out is, because it seems like such a macho move that Alberta's done, and in BC, I don't think the BC government wants to back down on the concerns they've raised about what would be in that pipeline. I can't see either wanting to back down, so I don't see a quick way out. Do you?
Well, I know. Again, us being linked to policy decisions or debates in another sector makes no sense. We've got our own issues trying to market BC wine. Listen, it is a crowded marketplace. When we lose shelf space in Alberta, there is, consumers are going to be concerned in the short term, but it'll be replaced. Every exporting country in the world of wine is looking at this market, and if they get an opportunity to grab some shelf space, they will aggressively do that, and for us to fight our way back. And consumers are fickle. As you know, in the wine business or any business, you switch brands, trying to get them to come back is no easy task.
Right. So even if it ended tomorrow, there would already be some.
The damage, I've been saying the damage has been done. It's immediate and long term, just the simple fact that we've lost that shelf space. And again, we're tied somehow emotionally to your position relating to another sector that has absolutely nothing to do with family-owned growers and winemakers here in British Columbia.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people around here are going to be wishing you luck with your injunction.
Yep.
Thanks very much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
To talk to us.
Thanks for taking the time to listen.
Miles Prodan from the BC Wine Institute. You're watching Kelowna Now.